One of the most commonly asked questions by students is, Mr. Gibson, how can I learn better? So I wanted to make this little video of learning tips so that you can basically see what the science says about what's the best way to learn. I got a lot of these ideas from the book called Make It Stick by Peter Brown. If you ever have an opportunity to read it, I highly recommend it for you. So I want you to take a minute and think about what your studying looks like. Does it consist of these things? Long cramming sessions the night before the test, answering study guide questions but not reviewing them, staring for long periods of time at your notes, rereading book passages or chapters, massive highlighting of your notes or passages from the book chapters. These styles of learning make you familiar with information, but unfortunately they give you a false sense of mastery. Now let me give you an example of what I mean by being familiar with something but not being a master of it. For most of your life you have been using pennies to pay for things that you buy. I bet you're very familiar with a penny, and I imagine you really think you know what a penny looks like. In your mind, I want you to imagine all the details of the head side of a penny. Now don't cheat and go look at a penny. Use your memory of pennies that you have long experience with. Now I want you to test what you think you know as a penny. Which of these, A through O, is what a true penny looks like? Having difficulty? You thought you really knew what that penny looked like, but now you're kind of doubting yourself? So this is what a real penny looks like. You can see that the motto, "In God We Trust," is at the top. We have over on the side, we have the date of when the penny was made and the mint mark. We have over here the symbol Liberty, and the mint mark by the actual maker's mark is down here on the shoulder, and Lincoln is looking to this side. So if you had picked A as the correct choice, you were correct. But I would imagine that many of you didn't pick A. So contrary to what most people think, staring at notes, rereading, cramming, highlighting, these do not make you a master of the material, but rather make you familiar with the material and give you a false sense that you actually know the material. Remember that you're familiar with what a penny looks like, but not a master of what it looks like. This is very similar if you use these particular learning styles. So I want to offer a few suggestions of learning techniques which science suggests are more effective. So number one, practice retrieving new learning from memory. That is, self-quiz yourself all the time. Retrieval and trying to retrieve what you've remembered ties the knot for memory. Practicing retrieval makes learning stick far better than re-exposure to the original material. So if you just keep on rereading your notes, that's not practicing retrieval, that's just becoming really familiar with what your notes look like. Okay, so practice, practice, practice. Retrieval, retrieval, retrieval. Now some ways that you can practice retrieval are by doing small written summaries of your notes or of the material you just read in a chapter. Now that takes a great deal of effort, and that's probably why this is better than just looking at your notes or rereading material. Quiz yourselves all the time. You can get other people to quiz you as well, but if you don't quiz yourself, you don't really truly know what you know and what you don't know. I love using flashcards. I think this is a really good method of studying. Writing reflections of your notes and of what you think you have learned is another way that you can tie that knot of learning. Again, all of these particular things are very, very, very active as opposed to the passive means of just reading, rereading, or just looking at your notes. The more effort that is required for retrieval, the greater the retention results will be. So again, you have to be active in this practice of retrieval, not passive. Now the enemy of a learner is forgetting. In 1885, a German psychologist named Ebbinghaus basically did a study, and he determined that there is a forgetting curve. He tested people, he had them memorize things, and then he saw how long those particular things lasted in terms of the knowledge they could provide. You can see on the y-axis over here we have percent of the retention of material, and we have on the x-axis the elapsed time since the learning. And you can see that in only 1 hour after learning something, 50% of the material is actually lost from your memory. And as time goes on, you can see that eventually you plateau out. You do remember some things, but you just don't remember a large quantity of things. So this is called the forgetting curve, and this is really, truly, our enemy for those people that want to learn. So how can you beat the forgetting curve? So remember, the first time that you actually are exposed to something, over time, you actually forget almost all that you actually learn. But if you repeated that learning, that is, you did a repetition, a retrieval of that, you can see that your retention of material is greater. The second repetitive effort, it's even greater. In the third repetitive effort, you get a greater percentage of memory retention over time. This takes a long period of time, and it takes a lot of practice to actually do. So what is the biological basis for the forgetting curve? The biological basis of the forgetting curve is basically can be seen in this particular graphic of a nerve cell. Now, a nerve cell isn't something that stays the same. It's not static, but it actually grows and changes based on what you do or what you don't do. So let me just give you a little anatomy here. Here's the dendrites. These are actually parts of the nerve cell that receive information from other nerve cells. And this is the axon. This little cord that comes out is the axon, and this carries messages to other nerve cells. So many axons actually have a myelin sheath. This is a fatty covering over it that speeds up the signaling. So if you truly try to learn and really put a lot of effort into it, you can grow more dendrites. You can actually grow the extensions from the axon. You can grow new receptors to receive more information from more neurons. You can actually grow more of this myelin sheath, so you can make a transmission much faster down the axon. So those are some things that occur. You also will take and make more connections between already existing nerve cells. So you can see in this particular graphic here, all the nerve cells, those things have to be connected together to form circuits in order for memory to actually take place. So, the unfortunate thing about that is that, you have to grow new receptors, you have to grow more dendrites, you have to grow more myelin, you have to grow more connections, make those connections stronger, and, it takes large amounts of time for that growth to occur. You have to have protein synthesis, you have to assemble those products, build those connections, and it takes time for that to happen. Do you think that happens in one cramming session the night before a test? It actually doesn't. So the more you practice, the more growth will occur, and the stronger the connections between nerve cells will become. Now, many of you who play musical instruments understand this perfectly. You have to practice those scales in order for your muscle memory to get good, so that you can play music that sounds actually really good. The cold hard facts about learning and remembering are that learning takes time. Learning requires repetition. Learning requires a lot of effort. The most effective techniques for learning often go against the techniques that most people use. Okay, so let's show you how that practice and retrieval what it actually looks like. I love using index cards. I don't know how you do index cards, but let me give you a system that you might try to practice at some point in time. This is called the Leitner system. And in this system, you basically have how many ever piles or containers of flashcards that you're actually trying to study, whatever it is, terms, definitions, or whatever. So at the very first pile or very first container, this is where you put new flashcards in. And as you answer them correctly, they go into the next container. And if you answer them correctly at the next container, they go into the third container, the fourth container, and then lastly, they get to the fifth container if you keep on answering them correctly. Now, anytime you incorrectly answer a question or a flashcard, it has to go back to the previous container. So you can see that 4 would go to 3, 3 would go to 2, 2 would go to 1. Now, the containers at the very beginning, those are the ones you more frequently study. The containers at the end are the ones that you least frequently study. So these you would study every single day. These maybe you study once a week or once every couple of weeks. So you keep all of your cards, all the things you're trying to memorize, you keep them in these containers, keep on continually reviewing them, and that's a good system of using flashcards. Some people like to use Quizlet or Anki. These are both apps or computer programs you can use to build digital flashcards. So I like the ones where you have to put a little bit more effort into it. I like to physically write things down myself. Well, another principle that you might find useful is to space out your retrieval practice. Study information more than once, but leave considerable time between practice sessions. This goes completely against cramming. I like to call it studying frequently in small doses. Study frequently, all the time, small doses. Space those workout sessions of your brain, space them out over time. The more repetition, the further the space of time, the better the memory. Cramming doesn't work very effectively for long-term retention of material. Another concept that might help you in your studying is to interleave, that is, vary the study of different problem types or different material. Don't study the same type of problem in block practice sessions, but rather mix up problem types. That works really well for math. So if you did 10 of the same problem in a row, it's much better to do two type of problems that are the same, two different kinds of problems, then two different kinds of problems, and mix them up. Don't study your flashcards or material in the same exact sequence. This could be a real big problem because you remember the material in the sequence, and then when you mix the sequence up, you don't remember the material. So varied practice challenges the retrieval of information you are studying and improves your ability to master the material. Another thing that you can try is to elaborate on the material. Add additional layers of meaning to new material you're learning. Relate the material to what you already know. Try to make it useful. Explain it to someone else in your own words. Explain how it relates to your own life. So one way you can do that is by making a mind map. So here at the center you put an idea and then you flesh it out. This is just a graphic showing you ways that you can flesh it out using different kinds of orders, different kinds of lines, different kinds of colors, images, whatever is useful for you. Mind maps you've probably done in other classes. Here's just a simple mind map of glands. I guess maybe not so simple. And you can see that the person here is studying the gallbladder, salivary glands, the pancreas, the liver. And what this person's done is they've tried to put every single thing they know about those different glands on these different lines. So they've mapped out what they know. Well, this tells you very quickly what they know and what they don't know, and it looks like they know a great deal. Another thing you can try is to attempt to answer a question or solve a problem before being shown the answer or solution. Okay, so putting the extra effort into trying something before you see the answer to it helps you to know if you know the answer or not, and it helps in that retrieval of information. It really stimulates the brain to figure out what it knows and what it doesn't know. Reflection on the material is another method that you can do. You can take the time to review what has been learned in a recent class and ask yourself questions about the material. Have someone ask you questions about your notes. Daily reflection can be a form of spaced retrieval. You know, it is considered a concept of writing to learn. Now, you know writing's hard. The reason it's hard is because your brain has to work harder. And if you work harder, then the learning material, the material you're trying to learn will definitely be ingrained even more deeply. Some people like to use Cornell Notes. This is a place where you can actually, you know, in here you can put your notes that your teacher has actually given you. Over on the left-hand side, you have a column where you can actually put in questions about your notes. And at the very bottom, you can actually write a summary of your notes. So this has a space for all different kinds of things. A place for your notes, writing questions for your notes. Now you could later on cover over your notes with a piece of paper and ask these questions and see if you can answer the questions about your notes. And then, you know, at the end of the class period, at the end of the week, at the end of the day, you could write a summary of your notes in your own words. Again, these are ways that you practice what you've learned. And if you practice what you learn, you're going to learn the material much more efficiently. The more effort you put into something, the more you're going to actually get out of the material. So in my class, I use a system where I actually print notes out. So you get 6 slides per page, and it looks something like this. Well, you do have a space down here where you could summarize what is contained in these particular notes that you just took, and you do have space all around your slides where you can write questions in. And you could cover those slides up later and then ask yourself those questions about your notes and then see if you know the answer. This is how you study. It's not easy. Okay, if studying was easy, everybody would do it correctly, but everybody's not. They're doing the less active way, which is cramming, just looking at, or just merely highlighting things instead of actively working the material. You always have to calibrate your learning. Use an objective instrument like a quiz. You know, your books at the end of chapters have quizzes. You have quizzes from your notes that you're writing, questions from your notes that you're writing. So this will tell you what you know and what you don't know. Having someone quiz you is really, really important. It puts you on the spot and makes that brain work hard. You could also use, as another suggestion, memory techniques, such as mnemonic devices and the memory palace. Here you probably are familiar with Roy G. Biv. It's a quick little way that you can learn the colors of the rainbow in the correct sequence. When my son and I were learning violin, the way that we learned where the notes are on sheets of music is we learned the little mnemonic, every good boy does fine. So that's the E, that note right there is E and G and B and D and F. And then face, F-A-C-E, those are the notes. So I can imagine a face. Those are the notes that are not on the line but in between lines. You can also use visual mnemonics. There's tons of these things on the internet. So one of the hard concepts in one of my classes, anatomy, is people don't understand what the name of the structure is that connects bone to muscle. Well, you can see right here quickly it's a tendon, and ligaments connect bone to bone. So that's a way that you can see that really quickly, and it's a visual way, and it really sticks in your mind. You could make your own visual mnemonics or use the ones that are on the internet. I don't have time to really talk about the mind palace or memory palace, but if you watch this video, that's a good little video that shows you what a mind palace is and how to build one in your own mind. And then there's a couple of wikis there that I put. The first one is simple, the second one's more complex, but it shows you how to use your own home or buildings that you're familiar with to actually memorize sequences of different kinds of things that you're trying to learn. Use deliberate practice. Your learning should be goal-directed and should consist of repeated striving to reach beyond your current level of performance. So it has to be deliberate. Learning has to be deliberate. It has to be something that you put a concerted effort into. It's really important. There's a new psychological term called growth mindset that really you should embrace. You should believe that your level of intellectual ability is not fixed. You're not born with it necessarily, but rather it rests on a large degree in your own hands because of things that you do. You can grow, you can learn, you can be better than you are. Everybody can do that, and you have to think in that kind of way. If you don't do well on a quiz, say, hey, I didn't study enough. It was because I didn't work hard enough. It's not because I'm just dumb. It's just because I need to work harder or work in a better kind of way. There are lots of videos on the growth mindset. I encourage you to look at some of those as well. Sleep is really important to your studying as well. You should get 6 to 8 hours of sleep after studying material. This gives time for your brain to consolidate the material from short-term memory into long-term memory. So in your learning and studying, make sure you do these things. Make sure you're repetitive. Make sure you're methodical. Make sure you're consistent. Make sure you're hardworking. Make sure you have a growth mindset. And so you should be more like the tortoise, consistent, hardworking, and as opposed to the hare, just in cramming and short-term kinds of things. So I hope this video helps you out a little bit. You can rewatch it, or you can expand upon it, Google some of those ideas, and try to be more active with your learning. I wish you a good day or a good night whenever you're looking at this video. Good luck in your studying.